Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 316 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and I have the full crew here this week, starting with Richard, the owner of MTGGoldfish. How's it going today, Richard?
Pinch me, Seth. Am I dreaming? Pinch me.
Yes, it might be a good day, I think. At least I think all of us think it's a good day. But before we get into why it's a good day, we got another co-host. And Krim, what's up, Krim?
A lot. Actually, a lot is up here. So, I mean, I'm excited because, I mean, I think a few formats just kind of got an overhaul. So, heck yeah.
Yeah, so today was BNR announcement day. We learned last week due to a secret lair announcement that Wizards was going to be banning Uro, and today we got the full announcement, and it is much more than just Uro. There are, I think, 15 cards banned, 1 card unbanned. It is a massive list, impacting essentially every format outside of Standard, and really hitting some formats pretty hard. So we're going to spend, I think, the entire cast today talking about today's BNR announcement. That is the plan for today. But before we get into that and tell you what was banned, what was unbanned, we got a sponsor today. And if you ever struggled to sell your Magic cards, I don't know, maybe some of your cards got banned and you can't play them anymore, so you gotta get rid of them. Well, it's a lot of work to go through the whole buy listing process. It's a lot of sorting and typing and all that fun stuff. And really, it's not actually as fun as it sounds. It's a lot of work. And our show today is brought to you by Card Conduit, and they are the easiest way to sell your cards. And if you want to avoid all those hassles I was just mentioning, all the time it takes to sell your cards, this new service from the folks over at Card Hoarder will sort, grade, and sell your cards for you. And once your shipment is processed, you'll get the proceeds minus their fee. And right now, you can get a 10% discount by heading over to cardconduit.com/goldfish. So thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show today. And let's talk this massive BNR. So let's start. Richard, why don't you just quickly fill us in on the entirety of the BNR, like all the changes, and then we'll kind of work our way through this format by format, card by card, and talk about what all this actually means.
All right. We got a long one, so buckle in, okay? Historic. Omnath is banned. Okay, that's not new. Omnath was suspended before, officially banned. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, is banned. So Uro banned in Historic. Next up we have Pioneer, Balustrade Spy, and Undercity Informer, banned. No more Oops All Spell. Teferi Time Raveler, banned. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, banned. And then preemptive ban, Wilderness Reclamation. They were afraid Wilderness Rec would be too good, so they banned that one too. Next up, Modern. Field of the Dead, banned. Mystic Sanctuary, banned. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, banned. Simian Spirit Guide, also gone. Tybalt's Trickery, gone. So a big overhaul to Modern there. Legacy, Arkham's Astrolabe, Dreadhorde Arcanist, Oko Thief of Crowns, all banned. Vintage, Lurrus is unbanned. Lurrus is apparently okay in Vintage. And then lastly, affecting all formats, a rule change where now when you cascade, you actually check the CMC of the spell as you cast it. So no more cascading into Valky, or not Valky, but Tybalt's Cosmic Imposter with the Valky card. So Cascade works like you think it should now. So no more cheating mana on Cascade as well. So 15 cards banned across basically every format but Standard, and then Vintage gets to play with Lurrus now.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so obviously a massive list of changes, which in general, I'm super hyped for. Like, yeah, I wouldn't have minded to see some stuff going Standard. Yeah, maybe they could have done a little more here or there, but this, I think, is a really aggressive ban list, especially for Pioneer and Modern and Legacy, and it makes me really excited for those formats again, but probably to actually, like, break it down, we should probably go format by format, because it's just so much to take in. So let's start with the easy one, which is Historic. Really, only one meaningful change in Historic, which is Uro banned in Historic. Omnath, of course, was already suspended. It was not going to get unsuspended, so that's not really a change. Krim, I know we were all on board with Uro going. What do you think about this Historic BNR? Like, I know you're happy that Uro's gone. Is it enough?
Actually, I'm not happy. I really like Uro as a Magic card. I'm just really sad to see it go, but no, I'm kidding. I knew WotC was my Valentine this year. I knew it. Thank you. But this this ban list is actually not enough for Historic. I still think that maybe Muxus could go. Maybe something from Jun's Sacrifice could go, like maybe even like Mayhem Devil. I know it sounds ridiculous, but legitimately something that like that did need to go, and then that would shake up the format a little bit more. But I'm happy that Uro's gone. And this is like almost good enough, but I still think there's a few things wrong with Historic, but this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was a good thing. Uro was the dominant card in that format. I know there was some debate over like win percentages, how much does Sultai actually win, but the fact remained that Uro, depending on the week, when you look at the numbers, it was in like 30, 35, sometimes close to 40% of decks. So it definitely was the best thing going. As of today, it was number 9 most played card in the format, number 2 creature. It got beat up by Scavenging Ooze, probably to answer the Uro. So I think getting rid of Uro, that's definitely a win. But kind of like you, they probably could have done more, and it kind of sticks out a little bit because if you look at the other formats like Modern and Pioneer, Wizards went pretty hard at those formats and made a ton of changes. Historic kind of sticks out as a format that they used a pretty light touch with. I think you can definitely see an argument to get rid of Muxus, as you mentioned. I think Cauldron Familiar or something from the Sacrifice stacks is another popular request from the community. I think you could see BTE, Burning Tree Emissary. Again, maybe there's an argument there. Like, it leads to those really swingy games. But really, because they can manage Historic much more quickly than other formats, and we've seen like just out of the blue, oh, random day, like, okay, this card's gone from Historic, and they can't really do that in the paper formats. Maybe it's fine that they took a lighter touch, because if it turns out that whatever, Sacrifice or Gruul or something is too good post Uro, they don't have to wait months and go through this whole process to make bannings. They can just be like, all right, it's gone and done and over with.
I feel like for me, for some odd reason, Historic, it kind of reads more like maybe they aren't playing it enough, if I'm being honest here. Because how I see this is like Uro was just obvious, right? Like that's an easy ban across pretty much every format, right? Like, but if they're playing it enough, they should also, like, yeah, sure, they can do this whenever they want, but I think they should have been a little more like proactive with their banning right now. Like you had mentioned, there's a decent amount of cards that are still running around in the format that should go. But like it shouldn't get to a point where the entire community has to be in an outcry for changes. It should just kind of already start happening. And because it is a format they can easily adjust and change, I think they should have done that. They should have like done some changes like in the format with bans today, and if maybe like, you know, or suspend at least. And then if you know, it's not as bad as it seems and it feels like the format can afford it, then sure, we take it off the suspend list. But I feel like they should have been a little more active about the banning.
But your wild
What do you
cards,
think, Richard?
Your wild cards, they can't, they will not ban things left and right in Historic because of wild cards. So I think.
Oh, heaven forbid we have 4 mythic.
No,
wild
not giving you wild cards, but
like
you
that.
using your wild cards in Historic, right? Like remember, Historic is the last place for you to play your arena cards if you're an arena player. So Earl being banned, like Omnath being banned, like if they're banned in Historic, they just can't get played anywhere once they rotate out of Standard if they're not banned in Standard, right? So I think they're trying to keep a light touch on Historic so that you can actually play your cards and not feel bad. But I don't know, I haven't played Historic, so I'll trust you guys. You listed some pretty scary cards, so we'll see what Wizards does. But Historic Anthologies is always their answer. They can print a random Goblin hate card for you to deal with this in the future. So we'll see how it goes. But I do think they're a little more careful with Arena because of the finality of your collection, and like you can't really just change your collection at will like you can with paper cards. So I'm okay with them being careful.
All right, so Historic, I think overall everyone's happy, but maybe they could have done a bit more. Let's move on and talk Pioneer, which is a format that got a huge list of changes. So at the top of the list, of course, like everywhere, Uro. Teferi joining it. Now it's banned essentially in every format back to Modern. We have Undercity format Balustrade Spy, which targets the Oops All Spells deck in specific. Wilderness Wreck, another mistake of Standards Pass. It was at the top tier of the meta. If you look at the numbers, Uro, number 1 creature. Teferi, number 7 overall card in the format. Wilderness Wreck has been the top deck in the format at various times. And then the Oops All Spell deck is 8-ish% of the meta, which is, I guess, like solidly tier 1 status, although not currently like the number 1 overall deck. Although it is a really obnoxious deck to play around. And I gotta say, this is close to my Pioneer wish list for bannings. Like when I was thinking about and talking about what I wanted to see banned leading up to this update, this is basically it. I had Balustrade Spy / Undercity Informant, Uro, Wilderness Reclamation. I didn't have Teferi out of respect for Crim, but I am always happy to see Teferi banned as well. And this is a huge shakeup. Like for me, Pioneer feels back on the meta. I played a Pioneer League last week for the first time in a while, and my experience was like half of my matches were really fun and interesting, and then the other half of my matches were against broken cards that I had been begging Wizards to ban in Standard a few months ago, and those are just absolutely miserable matchups. Now I feel like with this ban list, a lot of those miserable mistakes of Standard Pass cards are out of the format. Hopefully that increases the fun matches, the percentage of the time you're playing interesting, different Pioneer feeling things instead of just broken cards from Standard Pass. So I personally feel like they just absolutely nailed it with the Pioneer ban list. Like I couldn't ask for any more than this, honestly.
I could ask for one more.
What would
Omnath.
you add?
Omnath.
I think Omnath is interesting. That was a card that I also had on my list to just ban. At the same time, maybe with Uro and Teferi being gone, so that would power down like the Niv decks that can play it, the 5-color Niv decks. Like maybe that's enough to keep it in check. I don't know. I can see that argument. I'm not sure I agree with that argument, but I can see why they would be like, all right, maybe Omnath will be okay once these other cards are gone.
I think that Omnath on its own will be just powerful enough to where it sure, it lost out on Uro, it lost out, like the Niv decks lost out on a few things there, but Omnath is still a very good Magic card. And if you could abuse it in Standard with its meta, you can definitely abuse it here, right? We already saw in Standard that Uro wasn't a part of the deck for a while. And I believe, right? Like, is that, that's, there was a period where Omnath was still just legal. Or did they ban it together? I can't remember. It all blurs together.
No, we had in Standard, I think they were banned separately, right?
Yeah, right? I think so. But I just remember seeing so much Omnath everywhere and Uro's here and there. I just couldn't remember what I was playing anymore. But let's just go. It's been a very long 2 years. And so I think, at a point, Omnath was on its own and still a problem. So, and that's in Standard. So I think as you get back into Pioneer with a bigger, card pool, it's just going to be it's still going to be pretty good. However, everything else that you had mentioned is true. I mean, I think that is stuff that we've all been wanting to see go. Balustrade Spy, Undercity Informer, that's great to see it go. I understand why Oops All Spells had to go, and I despise it myself, but I was just so caught up in the sadness that was playing against Uro and Wilderness Wreck that I didn't even acknowledge it as a problem. Because every Pioneer queue I played was just Wilderness Wreck and Uro piles, right? That was every matchup that I played. And that was true almost all the way back to Modern. So for me, for a good, this is just a huge sigh of relief because every format I played was Uro piles. And I don't play Legacy or an older format, so I don't know, I can't speak to that personally, but holy cow, playing all the way back to Modern just to get away from Uro, and I just couldn't get away from it.
Yeah, and Uro was the most played creature in Legacy as well. So you wouldn't even get it. You could go back to Vintage. I learned this week that you will see if you can guess this, Crib. Vintage has a reputation of being the most broken format. Can you guess what the most played creature in Vintage is?
scavenging ooze to help beat an Uro.
It's Tarmogoyf. It's the one place. Vintage is the one format where Tarmogoyf is still a true staple somehow.
So Tarmogoyf was too good for the other formats. That was the issue. It wasn't the format got too good for
Tarmogoyf was ahead of his time.
Tarmogoyf was better.
leave his one domain alone.
So, Richard, what do you think about the Pioneer changes?
Is Pioneer back on the table? That's my question to you guys, because Pioneer has kind of been dead format for a while. Remember, it came out of the gates, was destroying Modern. Like, Modern players all flocked to Pioneer, and then after a while, we couldn't even get like a league fired off on Pioneer. Like, you would queue for like 5 minutes for a Pioneer match. Is this enough to bring everyone back? Do we have sweet decks we can play now?
I mean, I that's what I was originally thinking with this BNR, but I think that's when I thought back to it. And the moment I stopped enjoying Pioneer was when I realized all I was doing was playing Standard all over again.
Yeah.
And now this actually doesn't look like Standard, right? I mean, what were the top decks? I mean, like, sure, there's like some Yorion decks still that exist, but like that's not the worst that you could do in Pioneer, right? So now that I don't see Uro piles, Wilderness Wreck piles, all of that stuff, and I mean both together, there's a lot here. And I'm very interested now to see what Pioneer looks like moving forward. Because that leaves Spirits, all some pretty sweet aggro decks.
Clip that.
Sorry, I'm so used to talking about a certain card.
There's
Burn
Spirits. There's a bunch of various like Lurrus, like Boggles decks, Lurrus Burn decks that are in the format. Mono Black aggro is still one that's floating around. Then you got like Rakdos Pyromancer decks. There's some like more controlling end of the spectrum decks. There's like some Sultai control and so forth. Blue-black control that don't actually use Uro. So for me, I think Pioneer is definitely back on the table. I think the thing about Pioneer from a larger perspective, though, is I feel like it's a format that it kind of got double whammied by the pandemic, for one thing, because it was very popular in paper, and losing out on the ability to play paper Magic right when it was kind of gaining traction was a pretty big deal. And then it's also the format that isn't on Arena, which is a bit of a drawback. So I feel like those things are still right now limiting factors for Pioneer as far as it getting back to where it was a little over a year ago, where it was like the new hotness, everyone was playing it. It was arguably more popular than Modern for a little bit. I think those things might keep that from happening. But for me personally, I'm way more interested in brewing Pioneer, in playing Pioneer today than I was even last week. So it's back on the table for me. We'll see. The only other thing is like Pioneer kind of has a history of more broken things showing up. We had like the THB broken stuff, and then they banned it, and then we had like the Wilderness Rex of the world and the Oops All Spells of the world, and now they just banned those. Does this mean Pioneer is healthy forever, or is it just waiting for the next broken thing to be printed? Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But for the short term, at least, I'm really excited to jam some more Pioneer games, and I haven't been excited to jam Pioneer games in a bunch of months, honestly.
Yeah, it feels almost like it's been half a year or something since I've been excited to play Pioneer, and I am genuinely thrilled. And I think once it hits Arena, now that this overhaul has happened to the format, I do think that it actually gets a huge boost in popularity again when it gets onto Arena.
Are you ready to drop like 10 grand to afford to play Pioneer on Arena?
I mean,
but
I'm hoping not.
Jokes aside,
no,
it'll be interesting to see where the format goes, because remember Pioneer like gained popularity off of like Modern kind of sucking, right? Like we're coming off Hogak Winter and things like that. But now that Pioneer's back on the table, Modern is also back on the table. So we'll see where the player base goes, whether they want to try to play Modern, Pioneer, or maybe even both. But we'll see how it goes. And we'll also see how Strixhaven affects this. Whether we see cards that just permeate through all formats again. Like, we get the next Uro or the next Omnath or something, and it just like trickles through all the formats, and then 6 months later it's banned from all the formats. We'll see how the formats hold up as we go into Strixhaven as well.
I do feel like they've done better with that since Core Set 2021. Like outside of Omnath in specific, Core Set 2021 didn't really have anything that broke formats all over. Zendikar was pretty fine outside of Omnath as far as breaking things.
You just listed a card from every set. How about Tybalt in Kaldheim? Is that okay? We just listed a single card from every set, Seth.
But Tybalt, though, isn't... Well, all right, let's talk about Modern, because I still don't think that Tybalt itself is broken. I think that the rules around double face cards are silly, and that they should, like, the card itself is fine. It's just this weird old synergy with Cascade that made it be a problem. So in Modern, obviously, Tybalt's Trickery, gone. Not going to complain about that. Uro, gone. Simian Spirit Guide, oh, that makes me so sad, but even I'll admit it's a better format without fast mana, so pour one out for turn 1 Blood Moon, but still, like, it's probably fine. Mystic Sanctuary, Field of the Dead, and then the rules change, which essentially just targets MDFCs, and then I think you mentioned, Richard, it like hits on adventures too. Are those the only two mechanics that it's really relevant with?
They said anything with a dominant side, so those are the two that we use often. I don't know if there's a third one or if they have a future card type, but basically Cascade works the way you think it should work. You can't cheat using, looking at the cheap half of a spell and then casting the expensive half. Now the rule looks at the half you're trying to cast. So yeah, MDFCs and adventure cards are the two ones that we play most often right now. Split cards remain the same.
For consistency, that also made a lot of sense too. I'm surprised, like it wasn't a thing, right? Once MDFCs were announced.
Yeah, it seems like I guess they must have just missed it. Wizards is like pretty upfront that they don't really test much for Modern. So I would assume if they had foresaw this Cascade thing in Modern, they probably would have just announced this rule change along with the set. And maybe they just didn't test Modern enough to actually find the interaction and see how good that it actually was. Because I actually think this does make Cascade play more intuitively, right? Like if you were a new player and you cast a Cascade spell, I think you would assume that you shouldn't be able to cast Tybalt off of it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty smooth way to handle the issue. As far as the rest of the ban list, I mean, this is exactly a lot of the cards I wanted to see banned. Tybalt's Trickery, I was willing to wait a little bit because I'm still not sure that it's actually good in Modern, but it certainly is obnoxious, and the play pattern is not very fun. But I'm still not convinced that it's actually like a good deck. Mystic Sanctuary and Field of the Dead, oh my god, I hate both of those cards. I'm very happy to see those gone. I don't know, which of those are you most happy to see gone?
Field of the Dead.
Mystic Sanctuary.
I'm actually kind of sad about Sanctuary because I do play
you know the most insulting thing I've ever that's ever happened to me. So I turn 1 Thought Seize them, get their Cascade spell out, right? I play Tarmogoyf. They then Teferi bounce Tarmogoyf. Okay, I kill with Strangergeist. Yeah, that happened. And then you know what they do? They Mystic Sanctuary, the Cascade spell back on top, and then Cascade. And I'm like, come on, right? They get the Tybalt, I Dreadbore it, and then I die to Uros and Field of the Dead tokens. And I'm like, come on, you can't beat this, right? So all of them getting hit is a boon, and mid-range is finally back on the table. Those two cards, the first two cards, Field and Mystic, just killed mid-range. You just cannot grind anything, right? You just cannot beat those cards no matter what you do. So I think this brings a whole archetype back into Modern, which means it's, Tarmogoyf's time to shine.
Just say it. Say it, Richard.
Tarmogoyf is alive.
I think Jund is playable. I think Jund is playable. Say it.
You can now achieve a 45% win rate if you're really good, okay? It's possible now. You might see a 5-0 deck list. It's actually not hacked if you see it, okay?
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe the biggest shakeup we've seen for Modern ever. This hits on Uros and everything. Number 1 creature, Simian Spirit Guide, even discounting that everyone plays it in the Cascade into Tybalt decks, which are now gone because of the rules change. There's a bunch of decks that rely on Simian Spirit Guide. I think the biggest loser outside of the Tybalt decks is definitely Ad Nauseam, which probably just isn't a deck anymore because you need the Simian Spirit Guide mana to cast your finishers, or it's going to be a ton worse than it was before. Hits on one of my favorite decks, Mono Red Prison, although again, It makes me sad to see one of my favorite decks become unplayable, but I really do think for the overall health of Modern that it's probably better to just not have cards like Simian Spirit Guide in the format. Like, they only do unfair things. So I'm fine with it being gone. And then getting rid of the lands, like, that hits on every Primeval Titan deck. There's decks built around both of those cards. The control decks that are just looping Cryptic commands with Mystic Sanctuary. So where does Modern go from here? Like, I'm looking at the metagame and, like, sure, Burn is still there, or Heliod combo is still there, but a lot of the archetypes that have really been the staples of the format for the past few months, they're going to be gone now. So what do you think rises up, or what are you excited to see now that we get this change, outside of Tarmogoyfs, Richard?
I think you'll see a lot of Tarmogoyfs. I don't see a lot of Karn destroying Tarmogoyf. I think we're going backwards in time, right? You're going to see, like, people play... Is human still a thing? I don't know, right? Infect, yeah. Burn, like, all these are back on the table now that you just don't lose a game that goes, longer than 4 turns, right? Now it's actually like, okay, can I stop the unfair deck? And if I can I stop the aggro decks, and then I can play a game instead of just, like, auto losing after turn 4? So I think we just roll back Modern 2 years, right? And then we play with fair kind of mid-rangey decks, right? Like the games will be slower, or not slower, but you can play slower without risk of losing to Field of Dead Mystic Sanctuary.
Yeah, I think that is a big impact. Like, if you look at the best decks that were not hit by bannings, it's probably like Hammer Time, it's Burn, it's like Blitz. Those are super aggressive decks. And you might think, okay, so aggro is just going to take over the format. But I think because you don't have Mystic Sanctuary, you don't have Field of the Dead as this unbeatable late game clock, maybe that means you can play the Juns of the world, or you can play control decks that have the answers to deal with aggro, and then play like an actual game of Magic in Modern, which after Cascades into Tybalt and all the brokenness that we've had for the past couple of years, actual games of Magic in Modern sounds really fun. Like, that sounds very enjoyable to me.
Yeah, actually getting to just play Magic and, like, not lose to, like, I was already reeling over just the Field of the Dead's existing, right? And then Modern just got farther and farther away from playable to me. And now that all of these cards are gone, I actually am really excited to see what Modern's doing now. And it seems like, this could be a format where I can actually have fun and play Jace the Mind Sculptor.
You could have played all these cards.
You could
play Jace with Field and Mystic Sanctuary.
If Richard can have Tarmogoyf.
Yes, we're back to Tarmogoyf versus Jace. Magic like it's 2010.
That's actually good Magic.
I'm not going to lie to you.
Right?
I think Tarmogoyf is a very key indicator of a format. If Tarmogoyf is a bad card, something is wrong with your format if it's Modern, right? That means, like, you can't block a Goblin Guide for whatever reason, right? Because you're going to die to, like, a Mystic Sanctuary later on. So as long as you can play, like, a big beefy creature and it doesn't auto win the game, like Uro, and you can actually stop aggro decks, I think you're actually in a healthy place. So I think Tarmogoyf actually is, like, a good test of whether the format is, like, in a decent spot or not.
Yeah, I think that's true.
That's how I feel, but place Jace.
but replace that with a Teferi that's banned in every format.
Look, I gotta play my Teferi somewhere, okay? So
well, Modern is the place. And I think, much like Pioneer, I'm really excited to play Modern again. But I've been playing Modern all along. Like, Modern, I guess I'm just used to it being broken at times. And yeah, it's been super broken recently because of the Cascade into Tybalt thing. But I don't know. Modern always goes through periods of brokenness, so I'm willing to put up with a lot in Modern just because I really love the format. But now I'm, like, super excited to try out new things, and hopefully this opens the door to more diversity in the format, more decks being able to compete, which I think would be a really good thing for the format and a really big deal. All right. How about Legacy? So this is maybe the hardest one for us to talk about because I think it's a format we all play the least. I like Legacy a lot, but I haven't played a ton of Legacy recently. So I guess I will mostly defer to the Legacy experts who have been talking about the format, and it seems like the overwhelming response to this BNR is positive. Like, the Oko, Arcanus, Astrolabe, Oko is like 36% of decks or something, so it is really doing its thing. and elking its way through Legacy, and the other two are like in 20-ish% of decks. So they are cards that were ultra staples of the format, and this will represent a pretty big shakeup there. I think it's probably good based on the reaction from everyone else, but what do you guys think? Do you have any opinions on the Legacy bannings?
Let me use my 10-year-old knowledge of Legacy. I think Astrolabe and Oko is actually pretty obvious, like based on what they do, how they invalidate Astrolabe invalidates entire strategies, right? Like there's no mana denial or anything. You just play basics and then Astrolabe fixes all your mana. So that was dumb. Oko we know is dumb. Arcanus, I scratch my head. Like I don't know. We need to ask Joe, our Legacy expert, why Arcanus is so bad. It's just a creature. You kill it. Like, okay.
Yeah,
like I don't know why is that to be banned, right? It doesn't have haste, it doesn't have anything. So I'm a little confused about that one. But the other two seem like pretty obvious to me.
I don't know. Dread Arcanist seems kind of really good in Legacy, right? It's just too much value for such a cheap creature, right? Because like Legacy, I don't see many creatures like creatures that are over 2-3 mana unless they're something broken or game.
But you can kill
right?
it,
like an emerald,
right? Like you actually have like
sure you can kill
it. You have like 2 turns worth to kill it, right? At instant speed, and then during your turn. So
but if you don't. Right. And like, if you don't, it just feels like that's, I don't know. It's just too much to come back from. The value's just so good there.
So I think that this is a ban targeted pretty much at Temur Delver, which is kind of separated itself as like the deck in Legacy at this point, looking at recent late challenge results and so forth. And I think this is a way that you can target that without going after like the holy cows, whatever it is. The cards you just can't ban. Like Delver of Secrets, it's kind of just like grandfathered into the format. Same with Brainstorm. People are always like, it probably makes sense to ban Brainstorm, but it's just never going to happen. It's like Soul Ring and Commander. It's just like what the format is. So I feel like hitting Arcanist is a way that they can power down Delver a bit without going after old school Legacy cards that old school Legacy players have come to love and accept. This is the new card in the deck that they actually can get away with banning. And I think because it's so good in Temur Delver, that's part of why it's maybe harder to beat than you think, because the Delver list, they're all the wastelands, all the free counter spells. So I feel like you probably can snowball an Arcanist pretty easily in a deck like that. So I think maybe it makes sense from that perspective, but I would also like to hear Joe's take on it. And speaking of Joe's take, I know he's working on an article for hopefully tomorrow about the banning. So his take will be up on the website in the near future as far as the Legacy bannings. What about Vintage? Vintage, no bannings, but we got an unbanning of Lurrus of the Dream Den. So Lurrus destroyed Vintage when it was printed, but it was banned in Vintage before the errata to Companion. So that was back when you could just play it on 3 every single turn. Do you think that having the Companion tax now is going to be enough to keep Lurrus safe in the format? Even reading Wizards' announcement, it sounds like they're a little bit on the fence. They're like, we really want everything to be legal. We don't like having hard bannings in Vintage. Is Lurrus going to be too good? We don't know, but we're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to free it for the time being and see if it does prove to take over the metagame again. We will revert the change and put it back on the ban list. So will it be safe now?
I have to. I don't know. It isn't like everything in Vintage like two or less mana. So if you can just take a turn, right? You might just be a turn slower, I guess. Is that enough to lose you the game? I think it could because it is Vintage, but I don't know. I feel like Uro. Once again, I need to stop saying Uro. That's just
so sad over the loss of Uro. Cannot get off his mind.
Yeah. I was so just beaten over this. I'm torn apart right now. Like Lurrus still seems pretty powerful, and I mean it's gonna be something they'll have to probably monitor. But I don't play Vintage enough to like speak on it. This is just what it seems like from the outside.
Go ahead.
It
Richard.
seems slow. No, so I mean the problem with Lurrus is like, you could Black Lotus Lurrus and then get a Lotus back, right? And then like you're just set up, right? Like you can just do whatever you want. Now you have to pay like 6 mana to get that Lurrus on the battlefield. I think that's a lot. So I don't know if that's good enough, but I don't think like before Lurrus was in like literally every deck because it was a free roll, right? I don't think that will happen now. Maybe there is a deck with Lurrus that's really good still, but like that's a lot of mana. That's like a Black Lotus worth of mana now just to put it in your hand. So I feel like that's enough to tip the power.
But is the upside not worth it? Like the upside, because like everything in Vintage is like 2 or less, right? Outside of like Monastery Mentor. Is that still legal?
Mentor is restricted. I think it's
Okay,
restricted.
I remember there was
it's
something.
restricted. It's restricted in Vintage.
Okay, well, yeah, like everything inside Vintage is like, it falls right under 2 or less. So I feel like the upside, I know that there's like this perception that Vintage, everybody just loses like on turn 1, but there's actually a lot there and a lot that goes on. And, you know, 6 mana, but like 6 mana to essentially just completely like outvalue your opponent and grind him into the ground. It's actually not a lot.
Maybe you're right.
I mean,
it seems good.
Also, I mean, at the same time, remember, I mean, when Lures was legal, that was before they printed like Rick in the Walking Dead Secret Lair drop, which gives you a 4-drop that you really want in your human stack. So maybe Rick Steadfast Leader is gonna save the day. It makes you think twice.
Thought there was a new card that got called Rick, and I thought like this is like Eugene is Ugin. I'm like, okay, sure. What's Rick?
Really though, like I think I kind of lean on Richard's side with this one. Like I think that people will still play Lures in Vintage because, as Krim mentioned, there are some decks where it's kind of just a free roll because you play a lot of cheap stuff, you play a lot of spells, so it doesn't cost you much to have Lures as your companion outside of a sideboard slot. At the same time, I don't think it's going to be broken like it was before because the like turn 1 Lures off Black Lotus, get back, you know, your Black Lotus, cast something else or whatever, like that line's no longer available. Like if you're doing that on turn 3, that's probably fine. Like by that time you're getting stacks and people have more turns to interact and to execute their game plan. So I think that it'll see play, but I also think that maybe it'll be safe with the tax being added to it just because it cuts out that really devastating turn 1 Black Lotus loop. So I guess that is all the formats for the most part. So what format from our B&R list today? Actually, one other question first. There's one format we didn't talk about, which is Standard. Are you guys at all surprised by the fact that we didn't get any Standard changes? No Ember Cleaves, no adventure cards, or were you kind of expecting this was going to focus on older formats?
I'm not surprised with the way the ban list like played out for Standard, but that doesn't mean that Standard is like fun, right? The reason why I think the way it is because if, as you know, I'd mentioned before, if they are banning anything else from Eldraine, they should rotate it.
Yeah.
And that's the big issue, right? Like any card, I don't care which card it is. If it is from Eldraine, just rotate the set. And then at that, like, 'cause now, I'm not saying they couldn't do it because there's still time, Wizards, to fix what is currently Standard. And that is to make it so that with the release of Strixhaven, just an early rotation.
I guarantee you we'll have a banning soon in Standard because I haven't played Standard in the last week or two, and especially with all these changes to all the other formats, people will go play the other formats and their Standard numbers will tank even further, and then they will do something about it. They're like, people aren't playing Standard. What do? Just ban some cards, right? You know, hit the front page of Reddit, make it fresh, right? People will come try it out, see what's up, right? But I think I'm going to spend all my time playing Modern, maybe Pioneer. So I'm not going to touch Standard, and whatever happens to Standard doesn't really matter until there's a B&R or a new set.
Yeah, I'll be playing a lot of Historic and probably like Pioneer, right? Because I like Uro was the only thing that gated me from playing Historic. No. By Uro, I mean because Uro's getting banned. Oh, I got to play the format. I'm so sad because it's gone. But like legitimately Standard. It's not that Standard once again is unhealthy. Outside of like your combat step being irrelevant, the format's just kind of boring to me. And so I'm really excited to see what Historic will now have, because I've been waiting to actually play a ton of Kaldheim stuff in Historic. And of course, all of it lost to Uro. But now we're on the menu and we're doing things again, and it feels good. It feels good to actually like have cards that cost me deck slots and don't do 9 things at once. So, Standard once again just feels okay. It's not bad by any means. I don't think it's like awful. Standard is plagued by Eldraine, but I think that's just a problem with a rotation thing.
Yeah, I've actually been kind of enjoying Standard recently, and I don't think Standard is like bad either, but it is a little bit samey, getting a little tired of seeing the same Eldraine cards. I will say when they announced Challenger decks this week, and it had like a bunch of Lovestruck Beasts and Bone Crushers and Ember Cleaves and all this Eldraine stuff, and there was no BNR announcement in the announcement of Challenger decks. I was like, oh no, it's definitely not happening. Like there's no way they're gonna throw all these Eldraine staples into Challenger decks and then just ban them right afterwards. So
what if they did in the announcements though, right? Like you check the announcements of the Challenger decks.
Now I got to read all the announcements on the mothership because you never know when they're just going to slide in a BNR.
They've broken it. They figured out the formula.
Yeah, they
right?
got
like,
me. Now I gotta read it every time.
I mean,
product release and a BNR. Just say there will be a BNR update in every product release, but say no changes across.
we meme on it. I mean, for people out of the loop, basically there's a secret layer announcement on Monday where Uro is in one of the drops, and they put a little note there saying Uro is going to be banned in all these formats, just so that you're aware, so you don't buy these cards. And yes, that was a funny way of doing a BNR announcement, but at the same time, I have to applaud WotC for like looking out for the customers, right? Like, how sad would you be if you bought this for your standard deck and only next week to find out it's banned from, or not standard, from for your modern deck, but it's banned from modern now, right? Like it would be a very scummy move. So even though it was a weird way to do things, I'm glad they actually did it, right? That they're actually looking out.
Yeah, I'm glad they did it. It's just funny.
Oh
right?
yeah,
it is funny.
Yeah, and I think it's well worth it. Look at, like, we suspected the ban list would be long or there'd be more to it, because why didn't they just rush that out, right? But because 15 cards are banned, they had to spend some time and do a little write up. So it kind of worked out.
Yeah.
Do you ever think we would see this many cards get the axe in one announcement? I feel like I guess I'm still used to like, oh my gosh, one card is on here. but
I mean,
is this the normal?
I feel like this is the pathway we've been going down, like over the past bits. And Wizards even and kind of said that in the article where they're like, yeah, we haven't done a lot of BNRs because the pandemic has like been keeping paper play from happening, so we just haven't really bothered a whole lot. So it kind of felt like all the cards on this one were stuff they'd been saving up for a while and like watching the formats, and they're like, all right, we'll just do this all at once, get rid of all these things at once. So yeah, it is definitely a huge BNR announcement compared to past ones, but I kind of feel like after the past 2 years, it's not really surprising for me. Like personally, and I don't know if I'm going to get yelled at for this, but I like shake-up bannings. Like that's what I want for standard. Like that's why I would like Eldraine to rotate, just to shake it up. It's not that it's necessarily everything is broken in the traditional sense, but I like ban lists like this that suddenly a bunch of the best decks in a format like Modern, or a bunch of, really dominating decks in Pioneer are gone. Those are the bannings that make me really excited to play a format, when if they were just like, okay, Uro's banned in every format, yeah, like that would make me want to like try Modern again, but I bet you within like a week I would be complaining about Field of the Dead or Mystic Sanctuary or one of those other to cascade into Tibalt. So I like these big BNR announcements, and I would like to see more of them, I think, in the future.
I'm actually right there with you. I think the shakeup is great. The part of me that's like, oh, my wild cards, like and stuff like that could be worried. But I guess since these all get returned to me at some point, right? But so arena wise, this could be easily salvaged because they give you back the wild cards. However, Pioneer, Modern, yeah, some of that. I mean, I don't get wild cards back in real life. So and a lot of these cards or Modern and Pioneer could get pretty pricey, but yeah, I do like these shakeup changes. Like these big format shakeups are awesome. And to be honest with you, whatever I can do or whatever they can do to get me to where back in Modern, where back in the simple days when the biggest thing I was worried about was Karn. Yeah. Right? Like I can't believe this is me in 2021, but golly, sure wish I had more Tron matchups.
I'm gonna hard disagree with you guys. Not on Tron. I do want to get Karn. That would be a refreshing change. But
what an honor.
It's good for making content. It's good for YouTube and stuff like that. But I do not want to see shakeups in my non-rotating formats. The whole point of those formats is they're supposed to be stable, long term. You can buy a deck and expect to play it in 5 years. right? If we had shakeups, Tron would be long gone, right? Like, Tron has been a dominant deck for a while. We would never have like Splinter Twin. It would have been gone like, a couple months in. So I think it's cool to have these like long story decks. Like you can actually trace like Jund back to like the Stone Ages or whatever, right? And see the changes because it's not an overpowered deck, right? The problem is when there's a deck so overwhelming that you cannot play random cards anymore, such as Uro. So as long as we don't have those, I don't want to see like any shakeups, right? I want to buy a modern deck and not have it rotate in 6 months. Right. So when Strixhaven comes and rotates modern again, I'm going to be upset again. Right.
Here's the thing, though. If you look at the cards that were banned today, they were all cards, I guess, outside of Simian Spirit Guide, that were printed in the last couple years and already shook up modern. Like
that's true.
I feel like that dream it's just dead. The dream is died of modern being a stable format, not because of bannings, but because of Wizards' design changes. Like they're designing cards to break modern every set, or to at least be playable in modern every set. So I feel like unless Wizards gonna like change their design philosophy and go back to the days of like, is it really possible that we make a top 10 list of modern cards from this set because we're like scraping around for something that might show up in a sideboard in some tier 3 deck? Like if they go back to that design era, sure, then we could have a stable modern format. But if they're going to keep shaking up the format by printing really busted cards, is it really harmful if they also shake up the format by banning some of those cards?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Like I agree with
inserting randomly overpowered cards and just keep banning them to get perpetual fresh formats. But I don't know, like, can you really recommend someone invest like $2,000, $3,000 in a modern deck and not know if it will exist in like 6 months, right? Like that's a little scary, right?
I think that's a really big question. I actually had someone bring that up to me on Twitter Day when we were talking about the bannings, and they said that, I don't remember the username, but they said that their takeaway was they shouldn't buy cards like Tibalt when the set's first printed. Like when something's printed and it looks really exciting, the right thing to do is not buy that card because you never know if Wizards going to ban it in a couple of weeks. And I think that is an issue because we've seen that with some of these really expensive cards. Like if you went out and bought Okos right after they were printed, or if you went out and bought Uros right after they were printed, you're kind of getting wrecked. To Fairy Time Raveler if you bought it when it was expensive and standard. So that is that is a concern, and I don't know what to tell people. Like, should you buy staples when you see like Uro and you're like, okay, that's the best card from its set. It's going to be played across formats. Should you run out and buy that card, or should you be like, no, I shouldn't buy this card because it's probably going to get banned? What do you guys think? I don't even know if I know the answer to that.
That's going to come down to what you're trying to get out of it. If you're a person that just wants to play, casually or, have fun and whatever, right? Like the competitiveness of Magic doesn't appeal to you, then yeah, don't buy it, right? Like, 'cause I don't recommend buying it then. But if you're somebody that just needs the best cards, the best deck, week 1, I'm going to like an open or something like that, then yeah, you do have to buy it.
Yeah, if you need to play the cards like right now, then you can take the risk, right? But I wouldn't buy it just to add to my collection. Like there used to be a time, right, where we're like, hey, this modern staple is being reprinted, you should stock up on it. Like Thoughtseize. Imagine playing Thoughtseize in 2020, right? You're like, when it reprinted, you're like, oh my god, Thoughtseize got reprinted, I should buy them. Right? And then they would just sit in your binder and never be played again because the metagame shifted in a way such that like entire like strategies like got removed, right? Like for example, like a card like a removal spell, right? You would expect that, yeah, maybe I can't play a specific deck, but removal should always be good, right? But the answer is no, right? Sometimes the meta just shifts into such unfairness that you never need removal. So like investing in Path to Exiles or whatever, like promo ones, may be a bad move. So I think modern moves enough such that you shouldn't really invest in staples anymore. You should just buy the deck you want to buy, right? Take the risk that it will be irrelevant, and then that's it. You shouldn't really like build out a 10K modern collection or something, right? Like that just seems horrendous, especially with all the reprintings and things like that. Like it seems pretty dicey to kind of just buy cards because you think they're good.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point out, and Krim kind of hit on this a little bit, is it is less painful in digital as well. Like, if you're playing on Moto, You're probably theoretically, hopefully, using a loan program because that's a pretty good way to go about it. And then Uro getting banned, whatever. Like, what do you care? You're just borrowing it anyway, so it doesn't actually impact you. On Arena, it's still a bit painful because if you spend a bunch of wildcards to build Sultai and Historic, let's say, yeah, you're going to get back your Uros, but you theoretically are going to have, I don't know, some other cards that maybe aren't super useful. Like, is Hydroid Cross is still going to see a ton of play in Historic without Uro and without Sultai being as good? I don't know. So you still might lose out a little bit on Arena, although getting back the wildcards for the ban card definitely helps. So I think, yeah, on paper, it's definitely a big problem. Although, as we go more and more towards digital, maybe it's a little bit less of a concern just because of how the economies work digitally.
I'm pretty sure digital costs way more than paper. I don't know if that like lessens the impact at all, right? Because you can still sell your paper cards, right? Like your Hydroid Crisis becomes literally nothing, right? So I don't know that makes it any better. Unless they change the model altogether, right? Like all cards are free and cosmetics cost a lot of money, but I don't think Wizards is actually doing that.
Yeah, they haven't really seen many signs of going that direction. So out of the formats, Historic, Pioneer, Modern, I guess Legacy and Vintage too, might as well throw them on there. Which single format are you most excited to play as a result of today's announcement?
Ooh. It's really close with Historic and Pioneer. Modern now because I love Jace the Mind. Like all three of those formats actually. Jace the Mind Sculptor and Teferi is legal in Modern
for now.
So I mean, yeah, for now. But like, if a format is at a point where Jace needs to get banned again, then by golly, we are back in 2009. Let's go. But it might actually be Modern for me now that I think about it. Because no, it's still Pioneer. No, it's still Pioneer. No way, I can't play Teferi. I don't know.
Oh, Richard, what format are you going for?
The only question is Future Sight or Modern Masters Art on my Tarmogoyf. That is, you gotta, the purist is like Future Sight, but you gotta shake it up once in a while, show them what's up, right? So
I present to you the third option, Box Topper.
No, that's too new. It's too new. But yeah, Modern, 100% Modern. I think we've rolled back to Modern Horizons, which, if I recall correctly, I complained about. But given the events of the last couple of years, I'll gladly go back to Modern Horizons right now, and then we'll complain about it next week, right? But for now, we'll have like at least a week-long honeymoon period where we're like, yes, I can play without dreading that my opponent top decks a fetch land of all things to get Mystic Sanctuary to lock me out of the game, right? Like, oh no, a fetch land, that's 2 zombies. I can't handle this, right? Like, oh no, I hope you draw your Jace.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think for me, it's probably actually Pioneer. Like Modern, I am really hyped to play more Modern, but like I said, I've already been playing Modern all along and just dealing with the broken stuff. So while I think Modern's a lot better, I was going to play Modern either way. Pioneer, I haven't been playing, and now I am going to play. So I think that's a format that has improved the most in my mind, for me personally, because all of a sudden, after going 6 months with playing like a single Pioneer League, now I'm like really hyped to start like making content and just playing and brewing, because I feel like the format, at least for a few weeks, is probably going to be kind of wide open and really interesting. And like I said before, I was already enjoying the matchups in Pioneer that were not based around Uros and Wilderness Rex and Teferis and Oops All spells. Like the formats without the banned and standard cards, or the decks without the banned and standard cards, led to some really interesting and fun games, I thought, in Pioneer. So now I'm excited that I'm going to play a lot of decks that don't have the broken cards and very few decks with the broken cards. So yeah, for me, it's definitely Pioneer, although I am excited about the Modern changes as well. And I think Modern gets a lot better as a result.
I'm just saying this here. Esper Charm, it's back on the menu in Modern. I'm just saying that card is gas. I love that card. And if I can play Esper Charm, it truly is the format for me.
Oh, Krim, I think you're still going to get hammer time to death before you resolve your Esper Charm.
No. Not if they don't have the hammer in hand, you see?
Yeah, you can make them discard it with your Esper Charm.
Yeah, you laugh,
got him.
But I cannot tell you how many games that has won me in Modern. Also, Jund just loses to Esper Charm. Like, if I draw 2, can they come back?
I hope I beat you on the ladder to answer that question, or in a league.
Yeah, we got we did get paired once on the arena ladder. Now we got to get paired on the modern ladder.
If I lose Esper Charm, thumbs up to you. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's cool, right? Yeah. You worked for it and you did it. Congratulations. I like it, right? As opposed to like, oh, you drew a fetch land and won? Okay, cool. Nice deck building.
Oh yeah.
All right, one more question. We just had this huge BNR, 15 cards on the list. What is the next card? Any format, I don't care. What is the next card that's going to be banned?
Muxus.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Muxus and let's see here. Is there anything left in? There is a discussion, right, for like modern. I think Pioneer is good, right? Everything that could be broken, I think, is like kind of just already in check. But modern, Pioneer, I guess, could lose Omnath. Historic could use Muxus. And then modern can use what you call it? Yeah, I think you could consider Primetime, but that's about like it, I think, for me in modern.
Yeah, Primetime
and Tron lands. I'm gonna preemptively complain about
Tron. I've been doing that for a long time, so welcome to the family.
Oh yeah. No. I guess we had just gotten so far from Tron that I stopped complaining, which was a big concern.
What do you think, Richard?
So standard, I think we're going to see some Eldraine go. But outside of standard, I think the next card will be a Strixhaven card for the old formats.
So whatever broken thing comes in Strixhaven.
There will be like a mythic rare that they're going to try to prevent, not ban for like several months and give up on it. Like a year from now, we'll get that one. But then there'll be like a helper card also in Strixhaven that they'll take out first. But eventually we'll have another Oko, we'll have another Uro, another Omnath, like guaranteed in Strixhaven. I am like 100% positive.
I used to wonder how, right, like in comic books and like those worlds and like anime worlds, how there's always a new problem, right? I was like, that's not possible. You just solved, the Joker's down, right? You got the Joker, everything's done. How is there constantly trouble in Paradise? And then I realized that's just our lives in Magic. Every day there's a new problem, and there really just is no endpoint.
Wizards is preparing you for the real world, Krim. we should give them a round of applause here.
Wow, thank you, Wizards. Life lessons. When I started to play Magic, I didn't know I was paying to also get life lessons. This is good. Thank you, Wizards.
I'm gonna go with oh man, I think the most likely is something from the Sack deck and Historic probably. I'll go with Cauldron Familiar because we know Wizards already doesn't like how that card plays on Arena because of all the clicking. So I feel like if they end up having to choose something from the Sack deck and Historic to ban, that's probably the most likely pick, even if you could argue for Mayhem Devil or something. And also, I guess secondarily, I like Richard's theory that everyone's going to play Modern and Pioneer, and Standard play might go down as a result of these bannings, and then they decide to ban something in Standard, and I would go with probably like Embercleave, maybe? Like, if they're not going to like ban a bunch of stuff from Eldraine, I guess that would be the single card that I would pick to shake up the meta the most. Either that or Yarion. I know that's not even an Eldraine card, but maybe one of those in Standard could be like a future, we need people to play Standard again, like Strixhaven is coming out, we need people on Arena type of banning.
I think that if there is a card to be banned in Standard, I don't think it's going to be something from Eldraine. That'll be too much. It'll be Yorion or some kind of Ikoria card, an ultimatum. Who knows, right?
Scoop Swarm. We all know that should have been banned like a year
has
ago.
To go.
How do you beat a copy every time they play a land?
They're just playing the game. No, like I think it will actually be something out of Eldraine, right? Because can they afford to, like, they really cannot handle another Eldraine ban, can they? Just rotate the set at that point. And I think that, like we're kind of skipping right over Historic here, but I would actually like to see what the numbers are on how many people are playing Historic to Standard, right? And I mean after Uro's banning, because I felt like before. Now, I mean, I'm not talking about YouTube and whatnot, because I think YouTube more people want to watch Standard, but like Twitch streaming wise, I feel like Historic has more fun and more people are requesting to watch Historic.
Yeah.
Probably true.
No, I think that's true. And I think being on Arena definitely probably is a big part of that compared to some of the other formats. So maybe they'll keep a close eye on it. And I guess the argument for Historic, the other one is, it is a format that got the least shakeup today. So like we kind of wrapping back around to the beginning, we talked about earlier, like maybe it's because they can just ban stuff much quicker in Historic than other formats. And maybe they have a working list of cards that they're, kind of got in the back of their mind and they're going to see what happens now that Uro's gone and then pull the trigger on a sacrifice card or something in a couple of weeks if things don't look good.
Exactly. And that's the thing, because Historic is the closest we can get to digital Magic. You know what I mean? Or to where it it actually feels like you're playing a digital card game, because they can ban and add things and move things around as they want.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. All right. Any other BNR thoughts before we wrap things up for today? Are we fish mailing, Richard, or are we going to call it for this week since we're kind of BNRing for a whole hour?
We can just call it. We can cover a lot of the questions are BNR related, so I think we covered them. So we can just resume Fishmail next week.
All right. So where should they send their questions for next week, Richard?
Send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail on Twitter, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I think on that note, that brings us to the end of episode 316 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So Richard, Cribb, thanks for hanging out. Thanks everyone for listening. If you got opinions about this big BNR or what could get banned next, let us know in the comments what you're thinking about that and what you think of today's big changes. What format are you excited to play? Let us know that in the comments too. And thanks again to Card Conduit for supporting the show today. So on that note, that brings us to the end for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful week this week, everyone. And we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes down in the world of Magic. So until then, this is the crew signing out.